Hi everyone, my name is Juan Riveros, and in this video I am going to try to explain you how to use Agilefant, an open source software for managing your Agile projects. I hope you enjoy this tutorial and find it useful if you are new to Agile. Agilefant presents itself as a simple, powerful and free backlog tool which provides 5 main features. Iteration management, which allows you to prioritize stories and tasks, create your iterations from the product backlog, and see the total estimated effort left and current burn rate. Project management, which allows you to prioritize the backlog, master multi-team projects with parallel iterations, and control progress versus planned scope. Product management, which allows you to split your backlog into projects and control the backlog of your entire product. Portfolio management, which allows you higher hierarchy team members to see the big pictures of how every product and project is doing right now. And finally, daily work and timesheets, specially thought for developers so that they can see their assigned tasks and stories, plan their next tasks, and log the effort spent in such tasks and stories. So let's get started. First, let's take a look to the technical details and start by navigating to their website, which is www.agilefant.com. If you have never used Agilefant before, there are 2 ways in which you can have Agilefant in your projects. You can either go for the open source, in which case you will have to install the Agilefant platform on your own Tomcat and MySQL server. Or you can use the cloud service, which is free for up to 5 users. So let's create a new Agilefant user account. To create your account, all you have to provide is an email address and give your account a name. Of course, you will also have to agree to the terms of service. Then, click on the Sign Up button. You'll receive an email informing your password and you are ready to go. So now that you have your administrator user, you can start using Agilefant. Let's go back to the Agilefant homepage. We select the login option and let's log in with our user. In this tutorial, we will first start with the administration features. On the menu on your left, you'll find the access to the users list. This list contains all the users currently enabled for your Agilefant account. Remember that in our free cloud account, we can have up to 5 users, while with the open source option, you can have as many as you want. There's also the option to upgrade your free cloud account to allow more than 5 users. On the right panel, you see the list of the users. Administrators have a right to access every content on your Agilefant server, while non-administrators are subject to access right policies depending on the teams they belong to. To edit a user, simply select it from the list by clicking on it, and then you will get a page with all its information. Let's, for example, change the weekly hours that this user can commit to our product. Simply click on the field and add your new value, for instance 36 hours. Changes are automatically saved. Under the specific information, we have some additional options, mostly for usability. You can choose if you want the system to automatically make the user as the person responsible for the tasks or stories that he or she creates. Once you're done, you can go back to the users list by clicking on Users on the left side menu. In this screen, you can also create new users simply by filling out their emails and some basic information, and they will get their password via email. Another administration tool are teams. Since you can be controlling several products and projects using Agilefant, it is wise to organize your users into teams depending on the projects and products that they will be working on. It is important to notice that the system allows the same user to belong to several teams at the same time, giving you flexibility to even create a team for each iteration if you want to. To create a new team, click on the Create Team button on the right. You give your team a name, and then you select the users that you want to add to this team. Notice that you can add teams into teams. This is a nice feature if you're managing large-scale projects but want to grant access to common products to several teams at the same time. When you create a team, you have a choice to give access to all products and all standalone iterations to this team. In our case, we are going to select No, because we want to grant this team only access to the product that they are going to be working on. Once you are done, you just click OK and your new team is created. Finally, we have the access rights option. Here, you can see which teams have access to which products, and you can modify these access rights. Later on, once we have created our product, we will come back to this screen to give our newly created team access to our product. Before we go back to the tool, let us first understand how Agilefant organizes the backlogs in order to manage them. The organization in Agilefant is simple and easy to understand. First, you have a product. And this product has several stories that detail the features that this product should have. Stories are organized in a tree-like structure in order to go from epic stories into more detailed ones. At the same time, a product will have several projects in which all of the stories are to be implemented. Think of these projects as major releases of the product. Each project will be implemented in one or more iterations, and the idea is to assign each one of the leaf stories to the iterations in which they will be implemented. Stories are scored in story points, and each story may have one or several tasks, each one with an estimated effort in man-hours. For our demo, we will use as a product example Microsoft's calculator. Think of the calculator as our final product with all of its features. Imagine we will develop this calculator in two phases. First, we will create the backbone for the calculator, the standard calculator, the scientific calculator, and the programming calculator. In the second phase, it will include the statistics calculator as well as new functionality to select different things. You can think of each one of these 6 elements as epic stories that can be subdivided into smaller stories, such as implementing each operation. There will be 2 iterations in Project 1, backbone and standard calculator first, and then scientific and programmer calculators. In Project 2, there will be a single iteration. So let's go now to Agilefant and see how all this is planned and controlled. We will start by creating our calculator product. We go to the option Create New Product, and there you give your product a name and you can fill in the description. One interesting fact about descriptions in Agilefant is that you can add links, format, and images to them. However, be aware that the images must reside in a public web server. You can also select immediately if you want to give access to this product to all the groups that you belong to or no group at all. In our case, we will select No Group. You click OK and our new product is created. You can see your new product by clicking on the product name on the left panel. There you have the description with the links and the images. You can also see that so far we have no user stories assigned to it. Before we move on to the stories, we will go back to the access rights options and we can see that our product has no team assigned yet. We click on the product and we're going to select the calculated project team to assign to it. We click OK and the product permissions are now saved. Now, if I were the product owner, I would like to create all the user stories that we have so far considered for our product. We can do this in two different ways, either by clicking in Create New Story or by selecting the product and then you can create them in the story tree. I find the latter easier and far more practical. So in our case, we have 6 epic stories for a calculator. So let's create 6 stories. You just click on Create Story and you fill in the story names. For Agile, the practice is to create the stories as a triple category. For instance, as a user, I want a certain goal so that I get a benefit. Although that description for a story is much clearer, in Agilefant, using such long names will make the story tree much harder to read and visualize, so I recommend using shorter story names. Now we have our 6 epic stories, but stories might be way too big for us to keep them as a single story. So what we have to do now is to divide them into smaller stories. There are actually 2 different ways to do this, both of them a bit cumbersome. The first way is to select the parent story and then select the option Add Child. All you have to do now is to enter the description of your child. The second way you can do this is by using the drag and drop functionality of the story tree. You can simply create another story, enter the description, and then drag it inside the parent story. So let's now add all the child stories to our epic stories. Once you are done, you have your full story tree. In our case, we only have 2 levels of stories, but in reality, in Agilefant, you can have as many levels as you actually need in your story tree. Now that we have completed the story tree for our product, we want to give each of the stories its story points based on the difficulty. One way to do this is right here on the story tree, simply by clicking on the story leaf and then assigning its corresponding story points. Once again, all changes are saved automatically. The aggregate of all the story points of the children will become the story points of the parent. Now we see that this has not been automatically updated on the screen. This seems to be a bug in Agilefant, but as long as you go to another tab and then come back, you can see that the aggregate is now being displayed. So let's continue to fill in all the story points for the rest of the tree. Now you have your entire story tree. Of course, normally you won't know in advance everything that you'll ever want to have on your product, or you may just have an idea of some features you want to have. For this, you can simply create an epic story without any further detail, and later in the future, once you know the details, you can include them in your product. Remember that Agile is all about iterative development. Now we can start planning our releases. And as described before, we do this by having projects. So while still being in our product, we go to the Project Planning tab. This tab, as the name indicates, allows you to do the planning of how your product is going to be built and released. At first you see that there are no projects yet. We only have our product with all our leaf stories in it. So let's create our first project. You click on Create Project and then you give it a name and you make sure that the project is assigned to the correct product. You select the users that are going to be participating in the project, and you also select the start and end dates of your product and a description. Once you click OK, you have your new product. Now we will select from our product all the leaf stories that we want to have implemented in our project. This is easy to do because you can actually do it just by drag and dropping it from the product into the project. Now we have the basic information for our project. So let's add some more detail to it. We can do this by clicking on the project name, and this takes us to the project information screen. Here we can, for instance, add the planned size of the project. This is in man-hours. You can also, and more importantly, prioritize your stories in your backlog. You do this by simply dragging and dropping. This is important because the priority lets you know which stories you would like to have in the first iterations. So the way to assign priority is by sending the story to the top of the list. Stories on the top of the list have higher priority than stories in the bottom. In our case, the generic functionalities have higher priority, followed by the standard calculator. Now that we know the functionalities that we want to implement in our project, we can start playing our iterations. We can do this both from the project page in the iteration tab, or the way I like to do it better, you can do it directly from the product. Remember that in the product we have this tab called Project Planning. There we have the product, the projects, and the iterations. So we can also create our iterations here. So click on Create Iteration, give a name to it, select the project to which the iteration is assigned, and give the start and end dates, assign the developers, and add the description of the iteration. We will grant access to all my groups to this iteration. Now we have our iteration, and in the same way we did with the project, we can start loading the stories from the project into this corresponding iteration. Let's create a second iteration. Notice that now we have all the story in our iterations and the project list is empty. This is good because it means that we are taking care of every story in the project in one of the iterations. So now our iterations have been defined and we are going to start with our first iteration. The first thing we have to do is, together as the Scrum team, define who's going to be responsible for each of the stories. We can do this by selecting our iteration, and in the iteration page we have a list of the stories assigned to it. In the column Who, we can assign who is going to be responsible for each of the stories. Be aware that we can have more than one person assigned to the same story. The stories have responsible developers assigned, and it is now time for the developers to take over and start their plan. So let's log in now with a developer user, in this case Claire Taylor. For developers, first they will find the daily work, and in it, at the top, she can see that she has 2 stories already estimated but has no tasks yet. And at the story queue, she will find the stories for which she has been assigned as responsible for. So her next task is to define and estimate the tasks for each of her assigned stories. She can do this by expanding the story and then clicking on the Create Task button. There, you will give a name to your task and an effort estimation in man-hours. Once you are done with the tasks for a story, you can see that in the summary of the story, you have the total number of estimated hours left to finish the story and the total number of tasks in the story. I will now proceed to create the task for the stories of our 3 developers. So after every developer has included his task and their efforts, we can come back to the iteration as the product owner or as a developer. In the iteration, now we can see all the tasks and the hours left for all the stories, and also we can see our burn down chart. Here, the blue line shows us what our velocity should be if we want to be in schedule for this iteration, and the red line shows our progress so far. So what is left? Well, now the developers have to start working on their tasks. The way Agilefant allows the developers to track their work is by the Daily Work tab, where you can see the list of tasks that you have to do. This list lets you prioritize your tasks in the order that you want to work on them, or simply plan ahead what you want to do on the day. On top, you have the task queue, and below it you have the story queue. If you just want to focus on tasks, you can drag your task from the story queue into the task queue. For instance, let's say I want to work today on the generic UI display. So what I do, I just drag my tasks and drop them into the task queue. Think of this task list as what you would generally report on your daily Scrum meeting question, what would you be doing today? Now, you don't necessarily have to work on your task queue. You can also update your tasks directly on the story queue. There is absolutely no difference. After the end of the day, when you have finished your daily work, you have to report the effort spent in your tasks and how much effort you consider that you still have left to finish the work. The way to do this is by clicking on the spent column for each task. And in this case, I am going to be reporting what I did last week on this task, so it was on the 3rd of November. What I am recording is that I spent 8 hours and that I still have 8 hours left out of the 16 that I had initially planned for this task. You can add a comment indicating what work exactly you did on this task. After that, you can click Save, and now that you can see that in your spent effort table, for the 3rd of November, you have spent 8 hours. We are also going to log now that we finished the work on the 4th of November. Now, we had 8 hours estimated left, but we only took 6 hours to finish the work. This is common in Agile because you can estimate an effort, but you may go longer or you may go shorter on the estimation. And that is the whole idea, and also what the tool can track. It can track how much time you initially estimated, how much time you have spent, and how much time you still need to finish. And this can change daily. Once you are done, you just click on the close button and your effort is logged. You should also make sure that you change the status of your tasks. In this case, for example, we will set it to ready. In Agilefant, there is a difference between ready and done. Ready means you have finished all your tasks, but you might still be missing some approval or something that is part of your definition of them. When you say done, everything is fully complete on this story and we don't need to go back for any reason. Also, don't forget after you change the status of your task to update the status of your stories as well. So since you only finished one task but not all of them for your story is currently in progress. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding all the developer efforts for this past week. So now that everybody has logged in their efforts and their tasks, what we can do is go back to our iteration and we can see all the metrics for it. So we know which one was our original estimate, how much effort we have left in our iteration. We can measure the velocity and how much effort we have spent so far. We can also see what percentage of our stories and our task is already done. What you see on the top is actually a snapshot of the current burn down for this iteration. I've noticed that in Agilefant they do not log the burn down on the reported date, but instead on the date the report was made. So this is why you see this huge slope down happening in the current day, because that's when I logged all the efforts for last week. However, for the spent effort, they do actually present it correctly for each reported day. Another tool that you can use once everybody has reported their efforts is the timesheets tool. I find this tool quite useful, especially if you are in a times and materials project and you need to report to the customer the work of each developer. First you select your product, then the project and the iteration. You can select specific users or all users, and then you export it to Excel. The result you get is an Excel file where you have discriminated by developer, day, and task every effort spent reported. This will help you when, at the end of each month or iteration, you need to bill your customer, for example. I won't go too much into detail right now, but I invite you to check the report comments yourself. Finally, for our product owners and project managers who want to see summarized information about their products and projects, there are two types of summarized information that you can get in Agilefant. First, if you go to the product, you can see the status of your entire story tree, where you can see which stories are in progress or done, and also other important states like pending or blocked. If you want to go a bit more in detail, you can go to the project planning option, and there you can see how the iterations are doing. For instance, in our iteration, we only have one story that has not been started yet, and we have one done and one pending. All this information is actually more suitable for a product owner. Now, if you're a project manager, what you care about are these dashboards. Here you can create your own dashboards where you add metrics either in projects, iterations, stories, or user workloads. So in this example I'm showing you here, you can see for our calculated project how far the project is ahead and how much time you have left, and a small screenshot of the burnout. There you see, for example, project in our system as well. You can also see here the dashboard for a story. You can see the predicted day of completion based on how the progress has changed in the past 6 weeks. And you can also see how many points of this story, assuming it is not a leaf, have been completed already. For a specific iteration, we can see a small screenshot of the burn down chart as well as story points, stories, efforts, and tasks done. So thank you very much for watching my video. I hope it was useful for you. I tried to cover what I personally consider to be the most useful and important aspects of the tool. There are other aspects that I have not covered in this tutorial, but I hope you'll be encouraged to try it and find them by yourself. Thank you for